to our next presenter. He'll be talking about how can educators with limited resources gamify their classes, a DBR approach. So, please.
Yeah. Thank you. Marcus unfortunately can't be here today, but he says hi. So I'll just start straight away. This paper is actually a response to another paper by Hamari et al., who reviewed 24 peer-reviewed empirical studies, and they found out that there's some underlying confounding factors, which is one, the role of the context being gamified, but also the qualities of the users. And what we add is that there's another, we say yes, it's true, but there's also another aspect, which is the design quality of a paper. And what we mean by that, because what Hamari et al. Have done is they have basically taken motivational affordances like badges or leaderboards, and then they've linked them to certain psychological outcomes or behavioral outcomes. So they say if you use points, that leads to enjoyment and engagement and some other things. So that's the basic setup. And we think it's we think that we would have to add design quality, because if you take the picture of a dog and you say this is a motivational affordance, a treat, you can say you can't really directly link it to a behavioral outcome. It depends on what actions you reward. For example, you can take a treat to teach a dog to roll or sit down or something, but it always depends on what you're rewarding him for. So you have to sort of train him. So that's why we think you can't just directly link a badge to a certain outcome. It depends on what the student gets the badge or the points for. So just a basic setup. Our research question was the title, how can a gamified learning website be designed, developed and implemented? So the method was design-based research. And the educational practice is actually a finance class by a professor at our school. It was a flipped classroom, so we gamified the website, and the gamified website we used to prepare the students for the classroom, in which they would study or solve case studies in groups. So we had multiple design iterations. So what you see now is something we ended up, it took a few semesters to get it right, I think 2 to be exact. And we also did some changes to the information architecture on the page layout, which is in the paper, but I'm not going into the details now. We also gamified the paper itself. Unfortunately, they made it too long for the proceedings, but basically you get points for every word you read, and you get a badge for every chapter you finished. So you can download it, it's down here if you like, or you can email me and I'll send it to you. The idea was to make like the reader experience what gamification feels like, and then point out the limitations of that system, because it's paper, there are a lot of limitations. So the next point, so what actions should be rewarded? This is the self-determination theory. Basically states that there's like a few basic psychological needs that are innate, so everyone has them. So everyone strives for autonomy, relatedness, competence, and those are some aspects to look out for. So ideally you build a gamified system that allows for some of these things. There's another framework I like, it's called the 8 kinds of fun. It just actually states that there are, like a designer can evoke positive emotions in learners. So they came up with a framework that has 8 aspects. So one is, for example, sensation, narrative, challenge, discovery. And the idea is that through certain rules you set, you invoke some of these emotions in learners. And it's very dynamic. So it's really hard to judge beforehand what will happen if you put in certain rules. You can sort of use this to create a dynamic and to assess it and to optimize it and to iterate. Now let's have a look at the design elements that can be used. So these are the ones that we ended up using. On the left hand, we distinguish the content elements and the feedback elements. So content elements we sort of link to intrinsic motivation. So ideally, the text itself is fun to read. So it's you enjoy it, or like the graphics are entertaining, or you use some videos. We, for example, use some cartoon learning videos, and ideally those are fun to watch. We use some learning apps as well, sort of like puzzles, a little more interactive. Use some quizzes and comments. And then we have the feedback elements up here, and we sort of link those to extrinsic motivators. There's a cascading information theory, actually meaning that you deliver information in bits and not all at once. Content unlocking is something we use. The countdown we used, we sort of pointed out that we we used the counter to say when the next classroom session starts, so they could see when they were learning on the website, oh, I only have 4 more days to get this content into my head, so I'm prepared for case studies. We used some progress bars, and then also we used achievement and badges, and points and the leaderboard. And that's what I will focus on now, because that's sort of the reward system that you build with these things. So this is also a framework that we built, that I'm just only pointing it out now briefly. It's for blended learning, but only the online part is interesting for us now, so we'll zoom into this part. And it actually means that you sort of choose the environment, so you go from right to left, and you choose the environment, and then you say, okay, use the method gamification, and then you have the content elements and the feedback elements. So that's basically what you saw before already. And you can distinguish the content elements with those ones that you can observe, and then those ones you can interact with, and then feedback can be summative and formative. So this may be helpful to, you can have the empty canvas and then draw in your own design elements, and then look what makes sense and what doesn't, and also compare it with other people and talk about it. So it's easier to discuss it, basically, because it's really hard to discuss a gamified system because people have different ideas about different elements and so on. Then the next point is, okay, so what actions can be rewarded? If you're talking about a website, there are some limitations. So what we used for this example is WordPress plus a theme plus a few plugins. So the whole thing together was less than 200 euros, including the hosting, which is quite cheap compared to how much a programmer would cost. It would be more for a day, I assume. Those are the themes and the plugins we used. So it's the Enfold theme. This is a courseware plugin, like a learning management system, basically, and then a gamification plugin. And WordPress itself is free, so it's open source for those other people who don't know it. And because of the setup, there are only a few actions possible. So the most basic actions were to check off learning units, and that's something we could measure and reward, to solve quizzes, and to comment. So those are the limitations of that system. And what we then thought about what we should reward, and with how many points, and distinguished a few things. So first is learning content. So by completing modules and topics, you would be able to earn like a total of 7,175 points. It's roughly 75%. And with comments, so this is an example of an average of 15 comments on the website, which is also sort of the average that we measured when we implemented it. So we awarded points for comments written, and also handed out comment badges. And there was a total of 1,300 points. Then we also handed out special badges that are just like a surprise, basically. So they got a Christmas badge just for the fun of it. And there was one really long learning unit that we gave them a coffee badge in between so they don't fall asleep. Those sorts of things. And then the case studies they solved within the classroom. They had a little multiple choice test to answer what the correct answer is. And then they also got a badge for that, showing that they've attended the session as well. What's important here is that the professor also stated that they would have to gain like a total of 8,000 points to be eligible for the exam, to put some pressure on them. And also we did this because that means that they can't take part in the exam without also writing comments and interacting with the content. And that also put pressure on them. Oh, okay, so I have to really do this to write the exam. So the next point is, what does it look like? So this is a quick screencast, like a 30, 40 seconds. So that's a cartoon learning video. I think let's start the video now. Yeah, started. So there was a cartoon learning video, some text below, and those are learning apps that are free that you can just embed into the website. So this is sort of a puzzle. This is actually, since it's in German, it's about valuing how much a company is worth, and there's different methods, so you can sort of link them to those categories. And then those were questions we also used to assess what we are building, to assess the videos, for example, if they like them or not. You have a few varieties of questions, multiple choice, and those open-ended questions are the ones that we ended up using. But we didn't assess every single quiz because that would have taken too much time. It was more for them to write it down and think about it and then continue. There's another quick video. What we did is we had really small learning units. Those are the comments below one of those learning units. And now I'm writing a comment there as well. What's really important is something that we implemented, that if you comment and someone answers to your comment, you get an email. A lot of systems really don't do this, but that means that you would have to constantly check all the learning units on the website to see if someone's answered your comment. So that's very important, and like drove a lot of people back to the website. And then you can see I just sent out the comment, and now I got like a badge and some points up here. So this is the first module that I finished, and this is my first comment. So we also use those badges and points for onboarding, meaning that we wanted to show the people really early on what we reward and how, and to point them to, okay, this is to say that this is something that's important on this website to do, so try to complete more modules and try to write more comments. And then also you can see up here, those are the points that they got, so they can always check how much points they have. And then this is a leaderboard that aggregates all the points and the badges. Of course, those are the real names of the students. So they could compare how they were doing on the website in relation to others. But I'll say a little more about this later on. So looking back at it, and also linking back to the self-determination theory, what have we rewarded? What actions have been rewarded? So let's take the self-determination theory. So we gave them autonomy, so they were able to choose at what time and what location they would use the website. We could have done more though, because the learning path is linear, so they couldn't choose from any topic, so you could increase the autonomy in theory through that. So the relatedness, we had the comments on the website. The thing is, we only were able to measure the number of comments, we couldn't measure the quality. So we could, like you have on Facebook, it's not really measuring the quality of the comment, but at least how many people like it. So you could use something like that and say if someone got 10 likes on his comment, you could give him points for that, for example. So you increase the relatedness in a way. And then competence, we had like checking off of the learning units, but we didn't check whether those answers are right or wrong. It's just for them to see what they put in. And then taking the 8 kinds of fun, basically, I tried to have a look at what points can be distributed to what type of fun, basically. So as you can see here, our gamified system is very challenge-based, because you got around 6,300 points. It's almost 70% for things relating to challenge. So mostly the checking off the learning units and comparing yourself to someone else. Fellowship, so those are the points you got for commenting, were around 20%. So we had some of that. And students were helping each other to solve some of the finance questions, mostly relating to mathematical questions. Then we had some points rewarded for narrative. And those were basically mostly the cartoon learning videos that they were able to see. And sensation, I sort of linked to the learning apps where they have some feel of haptics or something sensual, so they can take one thing, one puzzle, and move it over there. So what are our learnings? First, we found out that there was a correlation between the grade and how many comments or points they were writing. So as you can see, in Germany, the best grade is a 1.0, and with a 5 you fail. Some people did, unfortunately. But you can see how the points are going up here. So the more points you gain, the better your grade. And you can also say the more comments you were writing, the better the grade as well. There's no correlation really between the case study batches, and also this is more of a tendency, but you can see that there is a correlation. So the other learning is that the feedback elements worked very well, but they put a lot of pressure on students, because remember, it's a flipped classroom, so they study beforehand at home with the website and then go to class. So what this leaderboard actually does, it makes transparent who's done his homework and who hasn't. And a lot of students don't like it, because now it's obvious, right? So that's one thing. So it's like putting a lot of pressure. So extrinsically, it worked really well. But I think what we would have to do is to make the content elements more fun, so people enjoy those more, and it's also intrinsically fun to use, and not too much extrinsic. Okay. And the other thing we learned that was really interesting for me is because I thought they'd be all super happy and give me flowers and cake and all sorts of things for this, but that's not what happened. A lot of people actually missed pen and paper. And that's one really important thing when you study online. You don't have the overview that a textbook has. So if you have a textbook and you open it in the middle, you know, okay, this is the first half, that's the second half. If you're on a website, it's really hard to see where you are. That's sort of where the progress bars help as well. But also if you take some paper and you put one paper to the left and the other to the right, you can look here and there. On a website, it's really hard. You have to have a second monitor, or you start like taking the windows and putting them next to each other. That's really difficult to do. And that's one really important part. The other learning, if you take a cockpit of an airplane, I mean, that's a very complex thing to do, but so is learning. And you don't really have many measurements for learning as a student. You don't really know that well how well you're doing. Usually, they only have one number, which is a final grade, and they get that 2 or 3 weeks after the exam. For a pilot, that'd be a little too late, right? Because then he crashed already. So this is what's really important with gamification. It's not only about fun, it's also a lot about getting feedback. So the leaderboard shows you how you are doing in relation to others, which is important. The points and badges give you feedback, so does a countdown and also the progress bar. I have one quick comparison with WordPress and Moodle to also show what design quality means. And also I assume that a lot of people know Moodle more than they know WordPress. This is a quick video. So this is one of the quizzes. There's a video embedded as well. We are trying to do more with this, but we are still at the beginning. There are some plugins that you can use. So this is the level up plugin where you get up one level. You have progress bars as well, and you have a few other things. But also this has its limitations. For example, with WordPress, you can also hand out points for comments. With Moodle, that's impossible, unfortunately. So I'm actually planning on talking to the developer to see if he can integrate it. But in WordPress, you have pop-ups for badges, and in Moodle, you don't have that. You only have pop-ups for the levels you just saw, but not for badges. And that means if a dog sits down and you give him the treat 3 hours later, he doesn't really know anymore what he got it for. And it's similar with that. So it's good that the feedback comes immediately. So there's more to this, but I'll leave it here. So the conclusion, this is a slide from the beginning where you said, okay, the design quality we need to add. But what is the design quality? It's really hard to define. So I wrote down some questions on what's important. First, what actions are being rewarded? That's important. Does the user get immediate feedback regarding the actions and the rewards? So does he know what he got it for? It's one aspect. But then also, how are the design elements embedded within a website? How does the user experience the design elements? All those are important aspects as well. And there's probably a few more points, not just a few, probably many more points to think about. But what I really learned is that it's basically, we try to make it as simple as possible for teachers to use these tools. Because now we are developing a blended learning degree program, which is why we're using Moodle, and I'm trying to help the teachers to use these tools. And we try to make it as simple as possible so they experience themselves how it works, and then so that they are able to test things and iterate and go on. And depending on who you are, you may want to reward different actions. For example, some people like to reward challenge, some people like to reward social learning, so people study together. And this is a way that through the actions that you reward, you can sort of choose what sort of reward system you want to have in your class. Yeah, we hope that this bit inspired like some people to try it themselves and to see how it works, and then iterate and improve the system. Thank you. If you have any questions, please.
Thank you. Yes, any questions?
I just wondered if on the studying things of the students just understanding the rules and just putting comments in. So if I understood I got points for comments, I just put 25 comments in there and get those particular points if there's no quality check. Is there any evidence of that type of behavior?
Some, yeah. They also use it to just talk to each other. But that's also, I guess, something that they do in the class. It's just now that it's online. Ideally, you'd also reward the quality of a comment. We can't do that technically, unfortunately.
Can you
Not
tell
yet.
them that you're doing it?
Sorry, say it
Can
again?
you just tell them that you're marking on quality? But if you're not,
Say again, beginning.
just tell them that you are marking quality.
Okay, yeah, we could, yeah. But I mean, then we say it, but they don't get the feedback. And then...
Yeah, but if you mean at least the right comments too.
Oh, you mean the... Okay, I was talking about the comments. With the quizzes, we sort of left them in the blue, I guess. I think the professor may have said, okay, we don't check all the quiz answers. And for that, I actually know that some people only put in points, something like that, just to move on. But even that takes longer than like going through the textbook quickly, right? Because they have to click and then maybe forced to do a little more. But I guess some people cheated, but then maybe those are the 4 people that didn't pass the exam.
There's some more questions.
Okay, so in gamification, points, badges, and leaderboards are generally considered to be, a very weak extrinsic factor, and over time they definitely don't last. So how long have you been able to actually run this to actually see, one, do you see exhaustion, and 2, do you think about any other intrinsic factor that you can actually include?
So with the Blender Learning degree program that we develop now, we're producing more learning videos, and hopefully those are more fun. Also there we're trying to make it as simple as possible for people. I don't have any evidence on when they were like stopping. I can't really say, unfortunately. I also agree it's a very simple thing when you talk about gamification and fun, but there's a lot of value, I think, in those elements in terms of getting feedback about your learning process. So I think I would link gamification here more to gaining a lot of feedback about your learning process, and there's a lot of ways to improve the system. And also, I guess with the points and badges, which is what I wanted to try to show, it depends on what you reward. I mean, you could reward totally different things and may not have that effect. It's just really so many things to consider, where it's hard to say, but we're trying to improve it to have more like a higher intrinsic effectiveness.
What was the length of this course?
It was 4 months, around 3 to 4 months.
3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
But do you see any sort of tapering down of the engagement?
Of the engagement. As is the case with many exams, the engagement increases when the exam is close. So you could, if you measure the engagement on the website and increased, but the actual intrinsic engagement, I don't know.
Can you just bring up the link again to download the paper?
Yes, sure. Also feel free to send an email. But mine is way in the beginning.
Oh.
Yes.
But you mentioned biscuits and dogs. Did you think about keeper training? Train, so you know it. Sometimes biscuit and otherwise click, click.
Yeah. We didn't think about it. The thing is that what this theory says, the self-determination theory, basically says, I can put back in a bit, basically says that if you reward through extrinsic rewards, if you reward these innate basic psychological needs, that they may become an intrinsic motivation at some point, but only if you reward these really well. And I think we're really far from that, because before we would reach that, we would have to increase the feedback elements, but also increase the enjoyfulness of the content elements. And then maybe at some point we get to a point where they are happy to learn about finance, hopefully. We'll see.
I have a last question for you, actually. This is about the role of the teacher. So how would you say this changes the role of the teacher?
I think then, because many teachers, I think about how they can incorporate game elements and so on, and they they think that the role of the website and their role is not the same, that it's two separate things. And I think with this, because you as a teacher can choose yourself what actions you want to reward, so the website or the gamified system and your pedagogical approach, they sort of merge and ideally become one. Because if you like challenge in your classroom, you can build a website that's based on challenge. If you like people working together, you can reward that more. So I think this sort of enhances the pedagogical approach that the teacher has already, instead of limiting it, which I think a lot of gamified systems that are like readily built do.
Because it's more flexible, or?
Because it's more flexible, because they can choose themselves what they want to reward
Okay.
and what sort of reward system they want to have in place in the class. They do have a reward system already, because they point out certain aspects within the classroom, because they say, okay, that's a great comment, fantastic. I mean, you're already building a reward system, now it becomes more transparent.
Yes. Thanks.
You're welcome, thank you.